Airbnb.
Subdivision.
Granny flat.
More renters are opting to live with roommates.
Aussie spending big when it comes to renovating.
How do you know what strategy gets the most profit for your property?
It's not luck. You have to be out there looking and finding to see potential in properties that most people look at and run a mile from.
You got $100,000 off. Renovator Buyers Agent Michelle Lewis shares her story of recently securing a property way below market value and talks us through choosing the right options to maximize profit that actually get her to her goal sooner, as well as some of the details that can be crucial to success in property investing.
With an Airbnb, you need 2 years minimum of income for borrowing capacity. You can try a certain strategy. If that doesn't work, you can flip over to another one. So the key with rooming houses is...
Want to learn how this property expert maximizes profits by finding the right strategy to fit? I'm Todd Sloan. This is the Pizza and Property Podcast, and you're listening to my chat with Michelle Lewis. Michelle Lewis, it's been a while. How are you?
I'm really well, Todd. Thanks for having me today. Great to be here.
Thank you for coming on the show. You've got a pretty cool project that you're working on at the moment, and you and I have been chatting a little bit about this off air. And when you told me the amount of options, I was like blown away, because normally it's pretty cool to have like a bit of a secondary option up your sleeve. And then my first question was like, how did you choose? And the conversation for everyone listening at home was really interesting. As Michelle started walking me through like how it all came about, what the pros and cons were, I was like, this is an episode. This is something that I think is going to help a lot of people. But before we start going into the deal and kind of pulling everything apart, is there anything you wanted to sort of set the stage with about this one, Michelle?
Yeah, well, this was really interesting. I actually found this project for a client, and we quickly realised it was too big a project for them.
It's a lot of project.
It's a lot of project. And so we looked at the various and many options with this property, and we thought that we can't go wrong. If we can get this property at the right price, we should buy this one and add it to our portfolio.
So this was a bit of an accidental deal for you.
It kind of was. But as you know, it's not lucky. You have to be out there looking and finding. But it was almost, unexpected.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the deal? Like,
Yes.
how did it come about? Was it off market? What kind of prices were we talking? Like, a bit of the history of it.
Yeah, absolutely. It was on market, but it was being marketed as a development site. So the agent selling it was pushing that angle, whereas for me, I always see a beautiful home and I see the renovation potential, a beautiful 1950s Art Deco style home that was full of furniture and unloved. And sadly, the owner had deceased and was actually... had bequeathed her profits to the Cancer Council. And so there was an administrator looking after the property and we came in and saw it and did the numbers and said, okay, if we can get it at this price, it'd be a great deal.
Okay, and what were they asking to begin with?
So I believe when it first went to market, it was on for $650,000. It's a 966 square metre block with a 22 point something frontage. So it's a subdividable block. So they were angling it for developers. There was no mention of renovating on this one.
Interesting. Okay, and we're talking about an hour down south Adelaide?
Yeah, a really popular seaside destination for families, holidays, and also lots of people retire down there. It's a very growing community.
And what was the sort of rough median house price in the area at the time? Actually, when I say at the time, this was only a few months ago, wasn't it?
Yeah, we purchased this in October last year.
Yeah.
The median currently is around about $633,000 for a home in this area. So when I found it online, it had been reduced to about $550,000, and we actually negotiated and picked it up for $450,000. So
when you say negotiated, which hand was holding the gun? You got $100,000 off?
Yeah, well, I started actually lower, which kind of, it's almost embarrassing, but you've got to try, Todd, right? Because we knew there'd be a lot of work in the deal. And in fact, I think 6 massive skip bins worth of furniture we had to remove from the property.
So was because it sounds like 650, the median house price is around that sort of lower to mid sixes. Around the 6 was probably always swinging for the fence. 550 was it still kind of crazy and you got it for market, or do you reckon you got it way below market? Where do you reckon it kind of sits considering the work?
Yeah, no, we got it below market value. But I guess originally they were looking at the ability to sell off the blocks or to put multiple properties on the block for a developer, but no one picked it up, and we did.
I think this is such a good lesson for so many people that are looking at properties that are overpriced.
Yes.
And you and I were chatting about this the other day, something that when I was an agent I always used to do, and you'd walk vendors through, essentially, long story short, if you overprice it, your cookie campaign.
Yes.
And generally what ends up happening is the bargain buyers, like Michelle and I, and hopefully everyone listening, are the ones that kind of come in. Like you shouldn't have been able to buy that for $450, should you?
No, not really, no. But at the end of the day, there was no one else banging on the door to buy it. And I just held tight on our offer. He was pushing for us to pay more, and I said no. So as we do.
Which
But
is
yeah.
the best takeaway for that. So if you see a property that you're thinking this is massively overpriced, walk away. Everyone else is probably thinking that. So it might be your cue to walk towards it.
Yes, exactly. And I guess, there are some cracks in the property and things that a lot of people would look at straight away and go, no, but we've had the engineer's reports and we've done all the due diligence with building and pest inspections and, quite often being able to see past that and fix it or, see if there's any issues, which there weren't major ones. You can, get a really great home, a beautiful home.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've looked at not looked at the deal, you've bought the deal, but you've started assessing what's possible. Now, this is where the list grows.
Yes.
Can we start going through it, whatever order you want,
Yes.
about what's the first one that you looked at and went, okay, strategy number 1, this is possible.
Yes. Well, what got me really excited about this home, apart from the fact it's a great reno and it's a subdividable block, well, maybe we should start there, Todd.
Sure.
So first thing I see is what I call the insurance policy in the backyard. So if we ever get into trouble financially, we've got the ability to subdivide off a back block. There's various strategies you can use there. You can actually subdivide off the land and sell it. You could potentially get plans to build on the block at the back and sell that off as a house and land. You could actually build something at the back and sell that off. So there's multiple strategies with a hammerhead or a dwelling at the rear of a front property that you can use. So that was, for me, it was like, well, that's a no-brainer. 200 to 300K in the backyard to pay down debt if we need to. Boom.
Okay, so first strategy is hammerheading the backyard,
Correct.
which is already a pretty rare one to be able to, I know that's like the crown jewel is usually a corner block where you can chop it off and it's not a hammerhead.
Yes.
Hammerhead is usually the second, retain the front
Yes.
dwelling. And that's just one of the strategies you've got at play.
Yeah, and this is particularly good in this particular property because it's in a central part of this down south location. You can walk to the shops. It's in an established part of town, and it's got sea views. And so this back block is heading up on a hill, and so that's like tick, 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 tick. Yeah.
Okay, so first one is subdivide. You could do that, but it's by the sounds of things already. I'll get into more so what's profitable in a second, but for what's possible, that's more of you're land banking that for later
Correct.
possibilities.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, what's next?
So the other obvious thing, which we've already touched on, would be the renovation. So bringing the house back to life, using my upcycling budget reno strategy. So pretty much doing the whole house, and in a little bit different to what we normally do, I'm focusing on the inside of the house. The outside of the house needs work, but that's not a priority. It's getting the inside livable so we can choose our next strategy and where to go from there.
And is it like character? Is
Yeah,
it?
well, it's a 1950s, I would say, an Art Deco style.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so when it comes to sort of giving it more personality, it sounds like it's already got a bit to leverage.
It does, and I might be adding some sort of some features, whether it be a ceiling rose in an Art Deco style, just to give it a pop of character, which people love. It's got original floorboards, which we can polish. That's one option with the floors. We're currently debating that at the moment, my husband and I. Yeah.
Who's winning?
Well, it's really been a joint. Travis has really been involved in this one. He's done a lot of the demo work. He's really been quite passionate about it. So it's equal footing on this one.
Okay.
Normally
Interested to see.
I do get a lot of say, and he's happy to go that way. But yeah, no, it's been good.
All right, and what's the next one? So we've got subdivision potential, reno potential. It sounds like it's not reno potential. It needs to be renovated.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Correct.
So it's reno's a strategy. What else we got?
Yeah, so the other thing I noticed when we inspected the house the first time, so it was a city agent. That's another thing to be aware of. City agent, pretty much the house was open. It had been occupied by some young locals. Some windows had been smashed. They'd been hanging out, squatting, I guess, just hanging out there. So when we went down there, the thing that really got me excited was that 3 of the bedrooms have plumbing. And so then that got me thinking about a rooming house or a boarding house type strategy. So I would say that would be the next one.
So having sinks in the room's a little bit different. Do you know what it was before, or?
Yeah, look, I don't really know. There's probably various things that it could have been, perhaps like a boarding house.
Okay, all right. But either way, whether it's a little bit different or not, it's handy to have.
Yes.
So it could make it a lot easier. Again, another strategy to be potentially a rooming house. Now, this list keeps growing. What's the next one on the list, Michelle?
So the next one, of course, is the Airbnb strategy, but I call it an Airbnb strategy with a twist.
Okay, well, how come?
Well, the regular way of renting out via Airbnb is, you have a manager and you just rent it out all year as the whole house. But a strategy that I learned when I stayed in Sydney was Airbnb by the room, when the whole house is by the room. So there's no one living there, but each room is rented out separately. So I'm currently considering having it Airbnb during peak season and then rent by the room Airbnb in the quieter months as a way of attracting people that might like the more affordable accommodation.
Interesting. Okay. And so this is, again, to increase the yield, because if you just did it one way, it'd still be probably a really good yield Airbnb, but not as much.
Yeah, well, this particular location probably has an occupancy rate of about 50 to 60%. And so during the winter months, it's quieter. And so as we know, there's an accommodation shortage. And so perhaps renting by the room during those months is as a way of people finding accommodation that might be travelling down there to work or doing some locum work. And so, giving different options to people in the community.
I've never Airbnb'd before, like as an investor. I'm actually quite fascinated to try it. I started doing the numbers on a hotel when I was in Germany recently. I'm like, this does sound interesting. I don't know why I haven't looked into it. But
yeah.
But this sounds like a very different concept. Is this something that's pretty new, or where'd you come across this?
Well, I was actually travelling for a property event in Sydney, and I found this room in an Airbnb, and then I quickly realised there was a shared kitchen, shared lounge room, but the rooms were all individually rented. And I thought, fantastic, because that's going to increase your yield, right?
Yeah.
And give people a more affordable option of a room, because often people just need somewhere to sleep and then they're out for the day exploring. So, yeah, I was really excited by it.
Because the thing that always gets me about it, it's like if you were to change strategy and you go, well, it's Airbnb for this part of the year, then it's rooming for this part, it's just going to be a mess as far as leases and how this is all going to work. And I've heard of some people going, oh, well, I'll just Airbnb it for a few months and then I'll rent it out normally during the year. It's like, well, good luck trying to find someone that wants a 9-month lease. Like it could absolutely work, but the odds aren't in your favor. But what you're describing sounds like the only difference is locks on each bedroom door. And then one day you rent the whole house out on Airbnb, and then you can change it. So then you're just renting out by the room on Airbnb. So the strategy sort of changes quite a lot cash flow wise, but not really much as far as what actually physically needs to be done.
Correct. And the beautiful thing about Airbnb is you can vet people. So people do reviews on when they've stayed in other places. With hotels and regular places, you don't know who's coming and you don't know what effect they're going to have on your property. So for me, it's an insurance policy.
Yep.
Using Airbnb, it's not foolproof, but it can. It's a way of protecting, I guess, your asset.
Absolutely. All right.
Yeah.
So as far as what else is possible, is there anything else? We've got Subdivision, Reno, Rooming House, Airbnb. Anything else I've missed?
Well, we could go on. The other thing, of course, is a granny flat. So this particular property has a really large, actually I don't know how many square metres it is, but probably a good 3 cars in it, maybe even. But it's a workshop. So that could be converted to a granny flat or a 5th bedroom.
Right. So what you've described to me sounds like it's about 40, 50 square meters. It's like decent size, but not huge.
Yes.
It would, but the fact that it's already enclosed, isn't it? Okay.
Yeah.
So converting that to a granny flat is what, hooking up plumbing and going
Correct.
bathroom, kitchen?
Yeah. So it's got electricity, but no plumbing. So you could do a kitchenette.
And if you're just doing basically plumbing, kitchen, what are we talking, bathroom, it's already all kind of enclosed. What are we talking, 10, 20, 30?
Yeah, so I guess back of the envelope, let's say 20 to 30, it would depend on the plumbing connections to the home itself. So just as a rough guesstimate, yeah.
Okay, so that's definitely got my attention. I love a good granny flat deal.
Yeah.
So we've looked at everything that's possible. I'm pretty sure that is everything that's possible, right?
Oh, there's more, but that's probably enough.
Okay. So, and this is the whole point of the episode, because how do you know? None of these are bad decisions unless one of the things that we're about to get to later in the episode, which is around skill set. You don't have the skill set to employ it, then could be a bad decision. But they've all got their different merits. So how do you start running through the numbers, and how did you start running through the numbers to kind of start working out what's profitable?
Yeah. So I guess we're at a point where we want to start in some ways paying down debt in our portfolio, and so we're looking for cash flow. And so the rooming house and the Airbnb is really a standout for us in terms of increasing our ability to pay down debt.
Gotcha. All right. So now we know what's possible. Possible and profitable are two very different things.
Yes.
I want to know what are the one, like how are you working through which is the best choice for me? Should we start with reno, because the way that you've described this property, reno is probably not really a choice. Like reno is happening either way.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
So what are we looking at for like back of envelope numbers for reno?
Yeah. So we're toward the end of the renovation now. I'm predicting around about 100K reno on this one, a bit more than I normally like to spend. Trades are a little bit more expensive down south, and we also had a lapse over the summer holidays. No one does anything, so we had a bit of a lapse in time holding cost, if you like. But essentially, purchase for 450. Let's say we took it up to 550 for the reno, and I think a valuation of around 7 to 750.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So even if you don't put any of these other strategies in place,
Yes.
you're looking at a few $100,000 equity uplift.
Yeah, 1 to 150 easily. Yes.
1 to 150.
Yes.
Brilliant. Okay. And as far as time's concerned, so obviously you have already purchased this property and you're roughly halfway through, just over half?
Over halfway through. Yeah.
All right.
Yep.
And so around 1 to 150 profit for a reno. That's brilliant.
Yes.
And now after the reno, granny, you said what, 20, 30?
Yeah, let's say 30K to convert the workshop out the back to independent granny flat.
Yep.
And let's say we rented it for $300 a week. With an income, I guess, of around 15K minus all of your expenses. I think we just did a quick calculation.
It's positive by like $150 to $200 a week, depending on a few variables.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah, that's exciting.
And what was it, a 50% rental yield?
Yeah.
Just in case if you're listening to this and you've just got into property investing and now that's set a standard of, okay, I need to find 50% rental yields. Don't, because that's beyond insane. A 10% rental yield is already nuts. So 50 is just off the charts. Obviously, this is very, actually I shouldn't say obviously. It's like, that's actually one of my pet hates is when people say obviously to things that aren't obvious. And I've just done that myself. For anyone listening, if you are looking at this now thinking, okay, well, what is a good rental yield? Generally in Adelaide, what would you say an average is to give a contrast? Like you'd be
4 to 6.
Yeah, I think that's probably about fair now. Yeah,
Yes.
you used to be a little bit higher, but now probably around that 4 to 6 mark.
Correct.
So to give that as a marker point to show how 50 is just out of this world.
Yeah. It's what I call a bonus element of a property you purchase. You go for the basics and then everything else is a bonus, and we bonus stack.
Okay, let's keep stacking. So granny and reno, we're already looking amazing. And you might do the reno, you might not do, you might do the granny, you might not do the granny.
I think we need to now.
A little bit. The subdivision. Now, what are your numbers looking like there?
Yeah, so I got a quote, it was roughly about 25K for the subdivision, plus or minus a few bits and pieces. Guesstimate or estimate of selling a block, minimum 200 up to 300K, sea views, close to town.
It's on a slope, isn't it?
It's on a slope, so it slopes toward the road, so it is on a bit of a hill.
So the backyard would still get a view if they built up?
Oh, yes, beautiful sea views, which is prime property, right? Everyone wants a sea view.
Absolutely. Now, could you subdivide and keep the existing granny that's there? Would that have to go?
It would probably have to go.
Okay.
I mean, we might be able to squeeze a block around it. We'd have to check that out. It's not something I've investigated yet, but we can look into that.
But it would be more like a squish to hammerhead if you...
Perhaps. It is right toward the boundary, though. So, yeah, anything's possible, Todd.
Okay. All right.
And there's a shortage of accommodation, so councils are more flexible, I believe.
Okay. And what do you reckon you'd be looking at then profit-wise? Because obviously if you're cutting the backyard off, the front house, once it's all renoed, is no longer worth like 700-ish. So with that property going down in value, but then you're creating all this equity by chopping the back off, what do you reckon you'd roughly be left with?
Yeah, so I think maybe 150. I think
150?
150 would be good out of that situation. And that is something we're not planning to do straight away. That's, again, an insurance policy for the future. But, yeah, we've got choices.
Okay. And so now Airbnb, that's another one because the yield's already looking great, but you could make it even better.
Yes.
And you've just said before you're looking at a potential Airbnb during the peak season of whole house, during the slower season, potentially room by room.
Yeah.
What do the numbers look like on that?
Yeah, so for Airbnb, there's an estimate return of about $45,000 to $46,000 annually, with an occupancy rate of about 50 to 60%.
When you say return, do you mean turnover or
Income.
that's income? Okay,
Yes,
so
yeah.
so it jumps up to what is that, $800-900 a week averaging?
Yeah, I guess so. But
Yeah.
of course, with Airbnb, there is a 20% management fee.
Okay.
And you also are paying for utilities and internet, etc. So there are some more expenses, but you would still come out on top.
So all in all, cash flow is increased, and you'll still come out on top if you do decide to Airbnb it.
Yeah. And I guess the advantage of Airbnb as well is we've potentially got the ability to use the property for ourselves, should we want to at any time, or sharing it with family and friends. So that does appeal to us as well.
So there's like a vacancy for a little bit you can see on the calendar. It's not eating into the profits. You can still enjoy it.
Yes, exactly. So,
makes sense.
factoring in the lifestyle factor for us, yeah.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Enjoying our properties.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I never think of that kind of stuff.
Don't you?
No, like they're just investments, but it's a good idea.
Yeah, look, I've always been very much against that concept of buying an investment because it'll make a great holiday house. I'm generally very against that. When people say that to me, the numbers have to work. If you want to go and stay in a certain area, go and pay for someone else's Airbnb, invest in properties that are going to grow for you. But this particular one works just by chance. Well, not by chance, but...
I know what you mean.
Yeah.
I did an interview. It's the only anonymous interview we've ever done. And this is going back a few years ago. And I think we called him Sam. I hope we called him Sam, and that's not his real name. Because we changed his name and didn't do a last name. He had a portfolio of around 50 properties, and then over a 10-year period lost half of them. Hence why he wanted to be anonymous, but he wanted to share his story because it's quite valuable. So if you rewind a few, we'll actually leave a link in the show notes below to this episode. But one of the things that I found fascinating about that is he was doing that. He was buying like holiday rental stuff in Noosa, and it was all of these places that were just amazing. Like it's the stuff that you want to show your friends you own. But that was what came first. And he even said like he started getting a bit too much ego involved.
Yeah.
And yeah, amazing to open up. But I wholeheartedly agree with you that it sounds like it's more of, if you want to do this the smart way, the holidaying there is the secondary effect, not the primary.
Correct, yeah. We've very much always done the not cool thing, bought housing trust properties or properties that are next to housing trust homes, and that's not what most people get are passionate or want to tell other people about. But I'm quite proud of the fact that we've done that because it has been a strategy that's worked for us.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And speaking of strategies that work, what's the last one as far as numbers are concerned for rooming house?
Yeah, so I think in very general terms, rooming houses, you need 5+ rooms. So we, with the Granny Flat Workshop, would reach that 5 rooms. And so I worked it out roughly. If you rent it out $200 a week per room, get an income of about $1,000 a week. And somewhere here I've got my notes on 52,000, of course. So you would have less cleaning fees. You would need to include your utilities and your internet in that, and also a manager. So the key with rooming houses is having a really good manager that can manage people.
And management fees between rooming and Airbnb are roughly the same. They're normally about 20%.
I believe so, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So it sounds like rooming house could potentially come on top cash flow wise then, opposed to Airbnb, but maybe Airbnb's got the potential to shoot ahead because what you've been quoted is more of an average, whereas the rooming house is probably like there's no chance of that shooting up.
Well, I think the $200 per week per room is conservative. They are very large rooms and it's a large home. There's a large backyard carport area. So, there's potential flexibility in that, I guess, with some of them being maybe a little bit more expensive than others. I agree with what you're saying though.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there anything I've left out as far as the what's profitable side of things?
No, look, I think you've covered most of the things, and that is a lot, but I think I just encourage people to see that potential, to see what's possible, and any time you're buying a deal is to have those multiple exit strategies or options. It's exciting and it's fun to have those choices.
I want to talk about, and this is really getting to the meat and potatoes of it all, skill set.
Yeah.
Because I think right now it's easy for anyone to listen and go, either do all of them or I'd just do this one. But I think it's so important, though, to look at all of the strategies and options you've got if you're fortunate enough to purchase the way that Michelle's purchased, because this is not normal to have this many options. How do you start assessing and now going, okay, how do I make this decision? And if we start with skill set, could you kind of walk us through that process and how you'd guide someone?
Yeah, well, I guess our bread and butter strategy has always been the renovation, so upcycling and being able to renovate on a budget. So that was an obvious given with this one, and that's what we're currently doing at the moment. I think project management as well. So my husband and I have been working together on this project. It's a bit of a challenge in that it is a 15-minute drive for us. So we're typically down there once a week, but you can certainly renovate remotely, managing trades remotely. But it's been a little bit slower than normal, but sometimes you have to go with the flow, Todd. So yeah, renovation and project management are definitely two of the skill sets we've got.
Okay. And when it comes to more like the subdivision side of things, if someone wants to tackle a subdivision, what are some questions they should be asking themselves first before they get partway in and past that point of no return and go, this isn't good for me?
Absolutely. So contacting the local council and asking what's possible, and just being aware of things like, if the size of the block is within 10% of what's required, you can push and have a conversation with planning and say, hey, we're a little bit under, but can we still do a subdivision? So speaking to council, obviously going to a private town planner is another option.
Like a private certifier?
Yeah, but getting quotes on the subdivision and the costs. Some people, and just I guess being aware of the blowout, so having contingencies, because retaining walls can be really expensive. So that would be something to factor in on this particular property.
And just on the subdivision side of things as well, if you're listening to this in Tassie, Queensland, Perth, wherever you are, subdividing your block of land is going to have a wild variation to it. Some states super cheap. Some states you'll look at it and be like, are you having a laugh? Like it's a lot more expensive. Just make sure you do your numbers.
Yeah.
But so we've looked at the skill set then for subdivision. Now, what would you say about the Airbnb side of things? Does it take a certain personality to kind of to do that, because there's a lot less certainty, if you will?
Yeah, you've brought up a really good point. I would say that Airbnb is not purely a hands-off strategy. So typically if you've got a regular rental, you hand it over to a manager. And yes, you can do that with an Airbnb. Fortunately or unfortunately, I'm the type of personality that likes to provide a really good service. And so I have been involved in our Airbnb and I do check up on things. So you really need to assess whether or not you've got that time capacity and that passion to be able to do that. But my manager tells me lots of people are completely hands-off and I'm a bit of an oddball, and it's very close to my house. So, but I love to give that extra love to when guests comes at the moment, because it's relatively new. Perhaps down the track I'll be more hands-off with that particular one.
So when you say it's very close to your house, I thought this was like an hour away.
Oh, sorry. No,
this is a different Airbnb.
This is it. Yes. So
Gotcha.
sorry.
Okay.
That was, yeah.
Gotcha.
But with this one, I would need to be hands-off because I wouldn't be driving 50 minutes to leave some food and things for the guests.
Especially if you're paying someone to do it.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I get you.
exactly.
So what would you say people should ask themselves then, skill set wise, before they jump into the Airbnb thing? If they've looked at that strategy and gone, nah, love the idea of having a little bit of a holiday house and an investment, what should they be looking at for themselves?
Well, what we know is that with an Airbnb, you need 2 years minimum of income for borrowing capacity if you're going to borrow against it. So the negative of an Airbnb versus a regular income is that the banks will assess a regular rental as income. You don't always have that with Airbnb, and so therefore you would need to go to a low doc loan or something like that. So just bear that in mind. I think the other thing is you need to find a really good manager. So some managers are really hands-on and train their team really well, and others may not. So then you've got to be prepared to try a manager and see how that goes, and if you need to change it up and find someone else. So there's setup costs with Airbnb, so you need to furnish your house. Of course, I've done that with mostly secondhand goods at really good prices. So and we've done that all ourselves, so that's been relatively affordable, I would say. But if you're interstate, you may need to pay someone to do that. So you've really got to look at the numbers and weigh it all up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Excellent. And rooming house. Now, rooming house seems to be a controversial one. Some people will love it. Some people are like, nah, I'm not doing that. I got sent a meme ages ago. Do you remember Squid Games was on?
Oh, yes.
and it was like it had one of the bunk beds in the room, and there was like 100 people in there, and it's like rooming houses in Australia.
Oh, wow, yeah. Oh, scary.
But it doesn't obviously have to be anything like that. A rooming house can still be a lovely place to live.
Oh, yes.
And if it's all put together correctly, it can be an amazing investment. But as far as skill sets are concerned, personality types, what should people really be thinking there?
So again, you need to be able to find a manager that will effectively manage a rooming house. So there is a lot of legislation around rooming houses as well, and one of the examples of something that is relatively new is having a disability access bathroom. So there are things you need to check out and to make sure of, and that's why it does become a little bit more complex because of the tenancy agreements and lots of different things. So number one, make sure you can find a really good manager in the area you're considering setting up a rooming house. But absolutely, a lot of people think, oh, rooming house, you'll have dodgier tenants, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
That may be the case, but it may not. And so that comes down to the manager bringing in the best possible people. Some, well-educated, wealthy people are happy living in a rooming house for whatever reason. That's what they do, and they, perhaps they invest in property and they live in a rooming house. Who knows? But I do love the idea of a rooming house because it is an affordable option for people in terms of accommodation.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely something on my mind. There is a lack of accommodation, which is a complex issue that we're probably not going to go into today. But, that idea of giving more people a safe place to live is a great thing, I think, for people that can do it.
And so what kind of questions should someone be asking a rooming house rental manager? Because they've got to be a different kind of breed to a normal rental manager as well, don't they?
Oh, absolutely. They're coming to a house often weekly. So they're coming into people's personal space. They're managing conflicts of interest, tidiness of the house, people paying rent, people coming from all walks of life. So I think finding someone's amazing. So obviously if they've done it for a period of time, how long have they done it for? What are the challenges? What are the pros and cons of rooming houses? What is the legislation and what would I have to do to my property? So I'd be asking, what do I need to spend on this property? Do I need exit lights? Do I need what type of locks on the doors? So those costs can all add up. Obviously furnishing a place in the first place for the tenants. Normally you'll have a bed, a desk, a chair, maybe a fridge, for example.
And it's generally not to the same kind of Airbnb standard, is it? Generally Airbnb, you want a bit more wow to it?
Yeah, look, I guess you've got more of that styling factor with Airbnb. So you've got the emotional holiday factor, whereas a rooming house is typically more practical, but it doesn't have to be. You can style on a budget without having to spend a lot of money and can make beautiful homes for people.
Okay. So now as far as getting to the goal, because we're looking at skill set, and let's say someone's going, look, I got the skill set for all of these. Okay. If I was in Michelle's position, I'd still be having a hard time choosing. So we're sort of narrowing this funnel down because more than likely that's not the answer. But we probably knocked a few out for a lot of people listening. But the goal, I think the goal is one that's really going to change things. How do you then filter through the different options with the goal that you and your husband have in place?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's a conversation we have, I guess, and it does come down to the numbers, but for us it's also the lifestyle factor. So if we do rent it out by the room, we won't have any access to that property. If we do Airbnb, we've got that choice of having access to the property. So for us it's about cash flow. But it's also, we're going to keep this one, it's a long-term buy and hold. And I think the thing is you can try a certain strategy. If that doesn't work, you can flip over to another one. And that's what I love, is you don't have to be locked into something. I think it's really important with any property you have in your portfolio to have, plan A, B and C and to be open to change and to be open to increasing that cash flow for yourself and providing a service.
Okay. So which ones have you ended up choosing? Obviously Reno.
Yes.
That's been chosen.
Reno. I think the next step is possibly going to be Airbnb. So Reno, Airbnb, and we'll go from there with that rooming house option, another thing to consider in the future.
Okay.
Yeah.
And subdividing, keeping up your sleeve?
Yep, we'll leave it for now. Let's see how we go. If we need to, we can. But we might also want to use that backyard in another way.
So the granny flat, that's a part of the Airbnb, or that's something that you'd potentially do later as well?
I think it will be a part that we've left that the renovation of that space because we wanted to really get the main house done. But once that's done, we'll definitely focus on that and make some decisions. And I think this conversation's been really good around that, and I'll definitely be chatting to Travis about what we've chatted about today. So thank you, Todd.
Brilliant. Well, the thing that I really wanted to point out with this, and this is why I think this is going to be such a helpful episode for so many people, because to me, and you and I were talking about this off air, it's the choice of buying a property always comes down to how is this one going to help me buy that one? And if I can't personally answer that question, I don't buy it. And I think this is the wonderful thing about yours is it's not like scratching your head, yeah, okay, we got to figure this out. It's like, well, pick one. There's a menu in front of you.
Yeah.
But if we look at like Reno, Subdivision, and to a certain extent Granny Flat, they're all equity uplifts. So Granny Flat is kind of half on that one. So I'll just put a little caveat next to that. But Reno and Subdivision, they're absolutely increasing the equity when they're done correctly. So that's potentially that deposit that you need to be able to pull out and go to the next one. But the thing that I love about this is then cash flow wise, you've got Granny, which is absolutely a cash flow increaser, as we've seen 50-something% yield as a standalone. And again, caveat next to that. Airbnb and rooming house. Now, Airbnb a little bit different as far as borrowing capacity is concerned, because sometimes they want to see, well, actually most of the time they want to see 2 years financials. We can have a chat off air. Apparently there is a lender floating around at the moment that is a little bit different with that.
Okay.
But that changes so frequently, just in case anyone's wondering why is he talking about that off air, that's a bit of a variable. Yeah. Rooming house, similar one as well. But I look at the Granny and I'm kind of go, if you Reno and Granny, just those two combined, let's even forget all the other ones, you're potentially having enough of an equity uplift and enough of a cash flow uplift to sit back down with your broker and they're like, oh, Michelle, Travis, yeah, you can go again. That's what I love about this. This isn't about just doing a project and yeah, cool, we made 50 grand, 100 grand, but we're still stuck. It's like this is a springboard property.
Yes.
And I think that's what's so special about it. But being able to understand all of the different options and then understand why they're important. That's for me is the main takeaway I hope everyone's getting from this episode, because I'm quite frankly jealous. I wish I saw this one.
A lot of people have said to me, Michelle, if you find any more like that, let me know. I'm like, well, I work for my clients first and then other people. But yeah, it's great.
100%. Look, so happy for you with this one.
Thank you.
If someone's listened to this and they've gotten really inspired, what's an action step? Something that they can pull out the headphones right now and just put into place straight away as far as really understanding strategies and this whole episode construct?
I guess the basic thing is to see potential in properties that most people look at and run a mile from. So if you can see that potential and, you know, if there is a big crack, investigate it. Don't just go, oh, nah, that's not good. Big cracks stay in houses for, disclaimer, I'm not an engineer, but for hundreds of years. And so just, you know, I think that's one thing we've done with our properties that we've bought is we've bought things that most people are scared of, and most of them are still standing, you know, today. So I would say look past the scary stuff.
I even had a building inspector say that to me once when I asked about cracks. Yes. And he's like, the general rule of thumb is if you can fit your thumb in it, you've got a problem. But then he quickly followed it up with, have you ever seen one fall down, Todd?
Correct.
I was like, no, I haven't.
Yeah.
It's like, again, very much disclaimer like you just said.
Yes.
You want to get the proper checks, but don't let it scare you off.
Exactly. So that would be one big takeaway.
Love it. Michelle, I've asked you this once before. Arguably, we've arrived to the most important question of the entire show. Michelle Lewis, what is your favourite pizza?
Well, I think I'm probably going to say the same as last time, but I'm going to say gluten-free vegetarian with no cheese.
Gluten-free vegetarian.
Which is not very sexy. But that's what my tummy loves.
I reckon you'd be sharing that with my wife at the moment.
Bianca.
Yeah, she's gone off a bit of the dairy and the gluten, so she'll be up for an unexciting pizza.
Yeah. Otherwise, if I was being naughty, let's say Nutella pizza or a chocolate pizza or a dessert pizza with strawberries and fruit, yum.
Now you're talking.
Yeah.
You getting that anywhere special or making it at home?
That'd be a homemade jobby, I think, but places do dessert pizzas, yeah.
Love it. Michelle, thank you so much for jumping on the show. And if anyone wants to have a chat, we'll leave links to Michelle Lewis Property in the show notes below. But are there any final words of wisdom or anything you'd like to leave with our audience today, Michelle?
I just want to do a big shout out to all the women, all your women listeners, and I just want to thank you for supporting the women in property that you have interviewed previously. Everyone has different challenges in life, whether it be children or partners or family, and it goes for the men as well. But I just want to encourage all the women to see what's possible in themselves, to set their goals, to make those action steps, and to see that you can do it as well as being a mum, and it can change your life. It can replace your income. It can help to build a better, more financial, secure future for yourself. And I think the other thing is not to compare yourself with other people, is just run your own race, take your own steps, do your own thing and see what's possible.
I love that. And just in case, if you are, I want to actually say, like, from quite selfishly now, I'll say this on air because I know she won't listen to it. I'd love to inspire my sister. My sister has made some choices that have just got her into a bit of a average spot. And I think she thinks everything's over and it's just impossible. She's mum, couple of kids, divorced, and I would love it if you're listening to this show, you're a single mum, couple of kids, and you've been in a bad spot yourself and you've turned things around. Please get in touch because I would love to share your story. Yeah. And like I said, quite selfishly, send it to my sister to inspire her because she thinks it's impossible right now. And I love what you're doing, Michelle, in the space. I think that I completely agree. There needs to be more empowerment brought to it because it's not impossible.
No.
I can say that as a guy though. I'm not a woman, so I can't say like it's possible for women because it's just like me commenting on something that I have not experienced. But I know that from just a general point of view of get into the space because it can change your life, men or women, absolutely.
And in fact, women that have been separated from partners or lost their partners due to illness or other reasons, renovation, for example, is one thing you can do immediately if you do have a home. Mm-hmm. You can improve the value of your home. So, in fact, women have turned to property when they have been left on their own or are on their own by choice. And it's definitely a starting point. So, anything's possible.
Absolutely. Michelle Lewis from Michelle Lewis Property, thank you so much for your time and I appreciate you coming on the show.
My pleasure. Thank you. I'm always happy to come and talk to you, Todd, and thanks for the opportunity.